We're live from the CNN News 18 primetime studio, brought to you by Green Lamb Laminates. Viewers, we mark the 1 year anniversary of the Ram Mandir Pran Pratishtha. 1 year ago, on this day, Ram Mandir's Pran Pratishtha ceremony took place as a nation set about reclaiming its civilizational heritage 500 years after it was desecrated. The temple ceremony, it is said, allowed Bharat to reclaim its swa. Not my words, but the RSS chief, Mohan Bhagwat's words, and a sentiment that I think all of us share, at least the most of us share. And I say for most because, viewers, there are some who saw this remarkable moment in our country's history as a plunge into the abyss of religious revivalism, especially Hindu revivalism, that they felt could erode the secular fabric of the nation. And you might recall, viewers, large number of editorials have been written by those people who claim to have intellectual pretensions, who claim to have a firm grip on the pulse of our nation. The question we must then pose today is whether this monument to Nyay, to civilizational Nyay or civilizational justice, could ever end up becoming a symbol of saffron supremacy, as is being alleged by the left privilegencia. Let's open this conversation out, because it is one worthy of having, because it so defines us as a nation. And I want to begin with Ashwin Sanghi, noted author, best-selling author, doesn't need an introduction, viewers, anyone who goes into any bookshop. In fact, I would say the books come, in fact, to us, because there's always somebody dropping by willing to gift you an Ashwin Sanghi book to say, get a grip on yourselves and on your civilization and understand it through metaphors and through a fictional context. But it's so rooted, viewers, in our value systems. And therefore, we have Ashwin Sanghi to really talk about this issue. Now, Ashwin Sanghi, how has the Ram Temple's consecration restored India's swa, so to speak, a sense of self?
Rahul, first of all, I'm delighted to be on your show, and I'm even more delighted to be joining you as well as Vishnuji, as well as my dear friend Anand. What a wonderful occasion. The way at least I see it, of course, the term swa is, of course, the trinity, as it were, of the three words, Swadharm, Swadeshi, and Swaraj. And in that sense, everyone would go along with that, Swadharm, which is the duty that you need to perform as an individual, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your family, whether it is for the society at large. Swadeshi, which is, of course, encouraging local production, manufacture, and, of course, Swaraj, which is self-rule and governance. But in the context of Ram Mandir, I am not too sure as to whether I necessarily agree with those three swas. To my mind, the swas that come to my mind when we are talking about Ram Mandir is Swabhiman, because that is the self-respect and dignity that we have been crying for Sanatan Dharma for so long. Or for that matter, Swapan, which is the dream that we all have had, that we want to preserve our civilization and our ethos. Or Swadhinta, the freedom to be able to worship at the sacred spots of our land. So in that sense, the Pran Pratishtha ceremony, which was a year ago, not only breathed life into Ram Lalla at the Mandir, but it also breathed life into our civilization, which has been wounded deeply on multiple occasions, and we've always plodded on, wondering whether we will become like countless other civilizations which are dead and gone. So in that sense, this ceremony 1 year ago was a message that we are alive and kicking, and we are here to stay. That is the swa.
Well, beautifully put, Mr. Sanghi, as usual. And I remember in my book, I had quoted you on this sense of collective memory. The voice of a soul long suppressed, to paraphrase Nehru, never really stepped out into the light, did it? It didn't. So I want you to talk a little bit about how this collective memory also was vandalized. not just the symbols, but the collective memory itself of our tradition.
I mean, we can't really seriously argue, Rahul, that the 7 decades from 1947 have been fair to us. That is, when I'm using the word us, I'm using it in the collective sense of Sanatan Dharma. I mean, we had Ambedkar who wanted a uniform civil code, which never happened. Hindu temples, even today, I mean, we are celebrating Ram Mandir, but Hindu temples, even today, continue to be run like fiefdoms of various state governments. The word secular was cleverly introduced into the preamble in the 1970s. Look at our history textbooks, which ensured that we were made to feel every day that our history should only be looked at as a series of defeats. And the repeated strengthening of legislations like, let's say, the Waqf Act, where even Hindu lands could be acquired, or the boosting up of minority educational institutions and giving them advantages which Hindu institutions don't enjoy. So in that sense, when there was a talk that when Mohan Bhagwatji was talking about the fact that this is almost a freedom movement of sorts, it is a moment of freedom of sorts, I think he was talking about the fact that we suddenly now have a civilizational and spiritual freedom which we otherwise didn't have. And I think that is so important. It's like a soothing balm on the soul of a land that has been repeatedly overwhelmed by the number of injuries that were almost in some ways inflicted upon it.
So Dr. Ranganathan, why is there such a debate really then over the fact that Mohan Bhagwat came out and said, if one were just to extend the logic that Mr. Sanghi here has put forth, that we attained our real freedom in a sense on January 22nd, 2024, in that sense of the term. Why is there such a debate? Because one would think that a freedom without Swabhiman or Swadhinta or Swapan is not really a freedom, is it?
And just and of course Ashwin, so thank you very much for having me as a panelist here. I completely echo all the sentiments of my good friend Ashwin ji. I'll just like to add a little bit out here because in answering your question, one has to go back to what we've missed understanding. And I think it's very important because you may call it ignorance, but I think it goes beyond that. I think it's this, our civilization itself needs a bit of remembering, because Ram Lalla's first birthday at Ayodhya is after 500 years, 500. The stone that he shaped in, the civilization he is the guide of, are old and ancient. But Rahul, we forget the stones may be old, but they are chiseled afresh. The civilization may be ancient, but it is born again. The people may be young, but they never forget. And that day may be like any other, but it marked a new dawn. 7 empires came and went, 7, but one civilization stood its ground. And that day, in many ways, redefined our civilization. Mohanji was right. But to understand how, and this is where I come in to answer your question, we have to define it. What is civilization? How can you define it? Is it an idea to be thrust upon the subject so they carry it forward? Is it the placement of forks on the left and spoons on the right of resplendent crockery? Is it sartorial splendor? Is it words uttered or written? Is it science? Is it ease of living? Is it wealth? Is it money? Many of the worst tyrants who have killed millions, wiped off entire races, even continents, have been poets, artists, proponents of science. But would you call their endowments as promoting or harboring a civilization? To me, the mark of a civilization, Rahul, is this unquenchable thirst of man to demand justice for his ancestors, to correct a historical wrong, because that exemplifies a continuity, an idea, a memory that can never be erased, that is worth fighting for, that is worth preserving. It makes justice greater than the sum of its parts. And that is why civilizations are not fleeting like empires. To demand justice for a people who are dead for hundreds of years, it is almost as though you can feel their pain, their suffering, their destruction that has transcended the limits of body and time. And that is why history is a medicine, why catharsis is a cure. And today, when I see the rights of our ancestors being reclaimed, when I see the banks of Sarayu shimmering with the light of thousands of diyas, I see this as a catharsis, as a deliverance of justice to my ancestors who were wrong. Rahul, I said history is a medicine. Well, it has been a very bitter medicine for the Hindus. Our leaders feared the consecration of Somnath would herald Hindu revivalism, and we stayed silent. Our leaders gave away the most sacred Krishna Janamsthan fraudulently to the predatory Eidgah side, and we stayed silent. Our leaders promulgated the Evil Places of Worship Act to deny us our legitimate right to reclaim our temples, and we stayed silent. But today, the Nandi outside Gyan Vyapi smiles and unbuckles its legs, for he has heard Ram Lalla's giggle. The baby Krishna buried under the steps of the Jahanara mosque stirs to life, for he has witnessed Ram Lalla's crawl. 500 years, Rahul, that's 20 generations. 20 generations before us were forced to see the Babri Masjid instead of the Ram Temple. The 21st generation is seeing the Ram Temple instead of the Babri Masjid. The time has come. The deliverance has come. And that is what is the significance of Ram Lalla's consecration.
Well, before I bring in Vishnuji, Dr. Ranganathan, precisely for that reason, I would feel that the attack on Mr. Bhagwat, suggesting that it was on that day, to paraphrase Mr. Sanghi, we got our Swabhiman, our Swapan and our Swadhinta. He is being disrespectful to what happened on 15th August 1947 midnight.
I don't agree with that at all. I think he meant it as a metaphor, as Ashwin said. Possibly you can say it was symbolic of our being free of the shackles that have been put on us by invaders, by people who hated us, and the faith, you can call it, or the way of life which we professed. In many ways, it was a deliverance, as I said. And, all of us know that 1947, yes, of course, we got physical independence, but it was not until 1950 that we removed even our dominion status.
Yes.
And it wasn't, had we listened to Mahatma Gandhi, he wanted the Union Jack in our flag, So would you call it complete independence? I would, there are things that need to be settled philosophically more than politically. And I think philosophically we would have been a lost nation had we not reclaimed this piece of land that you may call it, but the most sacred of it.
Well,
we would have been a lost nation.
Vishnu Shankar Jain is going to take it a step forward. He says we cannot stop at just reclaiming, of course, Ayodhya, Ram Lalla's birthplace. We're also going to be, of course, speaking with David Frawley Sahab and S. Gurumurthy in just a few moments. But I want to bring you in, Mr. Jain. This is a very important conversation. You today represent this sense of reclamation that a large number of Sanatanis share, perhaps with you. And they say that, look, we must at least set the record right. We are not saying that, we want to go with a spade to dig up, unlawfully places of worship which are contested, but certainly there should at least be an acknowledgement that there was a great vandalization, to paraphrase V.S. Naipaul, of the Hindu way. So I want to ask you, why are you so misunderstood, Vishnu Shankar Jain? Why are people calling you an agent provocateur, somebody who is out there trying to, implant the flag of an exclusivist Hindutva? Why do they say this?
Yeah, I think all those people are misunderstood who have participated in the revolution of Ram Temple. If you, Rahul, if you mark the date, 1528 was the date when Babur demolished a Ram Temple there.
Ji.
And after 1528, there has been incident of Mr. K.K. Nayyar, who was the district magistrate there. Then we have seen Ram Lalla logs being opened in 1986 by Justice K.M. Pandey. Then we have seen car sevaks being shot, brutally butchered and murdered in Sarayu. Entire Sarayu was red with the bloods of car sevaks. Then we have seen how in the Supreme Court affidavit was given that Ram Lalla is a myth. How in the floor of the Supreme Court it was mentioned that decide this issue after 2019 election, how in the Supreme Court it was told that Ramayana itself is a myth, how on the floor of the Supreme Court Ram Lalla's map was torn into pieces and thrown before 5 judges bench. So this is an entire mentality. Those who believe that Ram is a myth, they will definitely believe that all these fights is a completely a fight which has no motive with the object sought to be achieved. Rahul, see, the point is this. Definitely after so many years, as Mr. Ranganathan and Mr. Sanghi have pointed out, we have built Ram Temple. But the mentality of Babri Mosque, the mentality to support these kind of invaders is still persisting in our country. And that mentality we are seeing so far as Gyanvapi is concerned, that mentality we are seeing in Bhoshala, that same mentality we are seeing in Qutub Minar, that same mentality we are seeing in Krishna Janmabhoomi. Rahul, the question is very, very important. It's not about Vishnu Shankar Jain being misunderstood. The question is from what my dear friend Mr. Ranganathan has said, and this is what was argued before the Supreme Court by my senior Mr. Parasaran, historical wrong. If a historical wrong has happened, where is the place for the citizens and where is the place for the civilization to seek justice? Now today we have a Places of Worship Act 1991, Rahul, which says that you can go and quench for justice, and kindly see the domination. What does the Places of Worship Act section 5 say? That we are giving you the liberty to fight the case for Ram Lalla, which means from 1950 till 2019, 9 November 2019, we kept on fighting for justice for Ram Lalla. But you do not have the right to fight for justice so far as other places of worship are concerned. Rahul, I ask a question to myself. Is it not discrimination on the face of it? Is it not a discrimination with an entire civilization who wants to go to justice? Today I am very happy on the first anniversary of Ram Mandir, because this is the sole example in the entire world that the Indian judiciary is capable of solving such disputes. We have the example of Jerusalem. From past 2000 years, the dispute of Jerusalem has not been able to be solved by any democratic country. But it's the power of the Indian judiciary that through legal acumen, through facts and figures, the Ram Temple dispute was solved. And the same thing we need so far as other issues are concerned. There are many issues which are lying where the ideas, where the civilization is asking for justice, but the voices are curbed. The arguments are thrown at the threshold only for the purpose of what my dear friend Mr. Sanghi had pointed out, only for the purpose of securing the so-called secular fabric of the country. What is the secular fabric of the country? Rahul, I ask a question to myself. If the ideals in the Qutub Minar which says that this place was built, Quwwatul Islam was built after demolishing 27 Jain and Hindu temples, is it secularism? Or the Shivling, which is lying in the Wazu tank in Gyanvapi, where Wazu was happening, is that secularism? What is secularism? As my friend Mr. Ranganathan pointed out, that idols are there in the steps of Jainara mosque. Is it secularism? The question is that if historical injustice has happened, it has to be cured by the court. And this is the fight, Rahul, to give a message that pen is mightier than the sword. This is the entire fight of the civilization.
Now, Mr. Sanghi, what is secularism? During the debate when the Places of Worship Act was passed by Parliament in 1991 in the Lok Sabha, one Congress MP got up, and he's if anything, he's quite the agent provocateur. I won't name him, but you can go over the records. And he looks at Uma Bharti and he says, to me, a mosque standing upon a Hindu temple is emblematic of our syncretic secular culture. He said this, and he said this in reference to Kashi. So is that secularism? Is that real secularism? And how do you respond to those who say that Ram Mandir sets a dangerous precedence, which will incite more claims in name of civilizational justice?
Well, Rahul, the truth of the matter is that, you cannot, I remember a year ago, I had written this op-ed in one of the newspapers coinciding with the Pran Pratishtha. And I really honestly, I spoke from my heart and I said that in my opinion, the Indian Muslim leaders of our country painted themselves into a corner. What could have been a wonderfully negotiated settlement between two communities was allowed to fester. Now, Rahul, you cannot argue that Islam did not destroy Hindu temples. I mean, we have to shed that political correctness when we talk about these issues. And as Vishnuji correctly said, you don't need to go to Somnath or Ayodhya or Kashi or Mathura to understand that trail of destruction. Simply go to the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque, where the plaque proudly says that 27 temples, Hindu and Jain temples, were destroyed. So now I agree that one cannot attempt to right every wrong in history. But then, nor can you expect a wounded civilization to ignore all its open wounds. So any solution usually has to lie somewhere in between. And that is what really baffled me at that time, the inability of India's Muslim leaders to negotiate a reasonable settlement regarding a few key places that held a sentimental value. Now, the problem is that the genie is out of that particular lamp, as a result of which now you've opened the floodgates of litigation. You know, I'm reminded of that scene from the Mahabharata where Krishna goes and he goes to the Kauravas and he says, give up a mere 5 villages and you can prevent a war. I'm reminded of that moment where I wish that this had been in the nature of a dialogue and a discussion, and that would have been through secularism, where one particular community realizes that, listen, there was a certain amount of injustice done in history. We can't right every wrong, but at the same time, in order to preserve the fabric, we need to have a negotiated settlement. And one thing I want to end with, Rahul, is the fact that when we talk of secularism in this country, then secularism exists because Sanatan exists. The inherent nature of Sanatan is plural. And I've said this time and time again, that, you know, I mean, this is a no formula faith. You can have 33 kotis of gods. You can adopt the Buddha as the 9th avatar of Vishnu. You can have a figure of Nanak or Sai Baba in your puja. You can believe in yantra, tantra, mantra, or none of them. You can believe in that the path is arth, kama, moksha, or dharma. You can call a stone a shivling, and I can call that same shivling a stone. And both of us are equally welcome within the ethos of Sanatan. So had it not been for Sanatan, you would not have had Zoroastrians coming and being given refuge by Jadi Rana in India. You would not have had the Thomas Christians settling down in the south. You would not have had the Jews coming in at the time when they were expelled from Iberia. So there are so many instances where we have absorbed and assimilated. And that is the reason we are secular. So we are secular because we are a Hindu country. I think that's very important to understand.
So, Dr. Ranganathan, picking off from where Mr. Sanghi finished, some people say that precisely for this reason, we should not allow certain groupings like the RSS, etc., from turning this sense of Hindu hurt into championing the cause of a exclusivist kind of Hindutva, quote unquote, Hindutva, which will fundamentally militate against this pluralism. And therefore, let's not make Ram Temple a fulcrum of this kind of push towards Hindutva, which is fundamentally intolerant and against the ethos of Sanatana.
2 points here. First of all, one of the reasons why we all admire Ashwin, and he just exemplified that by talking so beautifully, the 2 points that he made. And, you know, the first one that he made, that, you know, he was always frustrated, thinking, why wouldn't, you know, this the Muslim community or their leaders just come to the table and say, well, all right, I used to think exactly like Ashwin a decade ago, until I read the Islamic scriptures. And that is when I realized that not an inch of compromise is going to be allowed, not an inch. And that is what that philosophy, that religion exemplifies. I got nothing against it, because that is their way of life. They are not going to budge. There is not a single example of compromise from that end. Be that as it may, fair enough. We have to realize it. that the problem is not with them. The problem is not with people who feel superior, the people who others, who have these notions of being the greatest, there is no other God. I have no problem with them. My problem is, having read them, understood them, is that we believe they can change. So in the last 10 years, if I have realized one thing, is that we have to work within the constraints of this realization that Hinduism, as Ashwin said, the second point that he said is all accepting, plural. We have to preserve it. Otherwise, we will not have a situation where we will be welcoming people who are persecuted from around the world. If Hinduism was not protected by warriors of Hindus, of warriors of Hindutva, then Parsis would not have come here, because this place would not have been all accepting.
Right.
So we have to realize two things. The other side, the people whose sides have persecuted and invaded and wreaked all this havoc, are not going to compromise even an inch. And the second thing is, we need to protect Sanatan Dharma, let alone, leave alone eradicate, as some people are saying, because if we don't protect Sanatan Dharma, if we don't protect the values that allow persecuted people from around the world to come here and seek sanctuary here, they will not be able to come here.
So the world will go to hell in a handbasket. That's basically what will happen. Okay, now let me one final time bring in Mr. Vishnu Shankar Jain. Mr. Jain, we are therefore left with no choice. We, as in those who believe in Sanatan Dharma and this whole exercise towards restoration of our civilizational ethos, memory, call it what you want to, we are left with no choice but to now go to court. Now, here also, the Congress, as you know, has approached the Supreme Court to say that, look, we have to, in some senses or the other, defend this Place of Worship Act, that any petitions challenging the constitutional validity of the Place of Worship Act must be summarily dismissed. So, I want to ask you, is this possible? What's your legal interpretation? Obviously, it's a legal debate, but a very quick one on that.
See, Rahul, first of all, we have to understand that no Muslim scholar can come on your channel or on your show or anywhere and say that they can build a mosque after demolishing a temple. But the point is, the moment you go and show and prove that you have demolished a Hindu temple and you have built a mosque, they will say that how many issues like this you will rake up. And if you will rake up these issues, it will destroy the secular fabric of the country. So there is a dichotomy insofar as the stand is concerned. The second point is that if you are taking away the right of judicial review, if you are taking away the right of judicial access to justice, which is the most basic structure of the Constitution, Rahul, I feel that you are destroying the basic structure of the Constitution. When Mr. Ambedkar was asked the question that what do you believe is the soul of this Constitution, Mr. B.R. Ambedkar said that the right of citizens to approach the court of law to correct administrative justice or a historical injustice is the soul of this Constitution. And what is precisely this Places of Worship Act done?
Right.
The entire gist of Places of Worship Act is that you cannot go to the court to correct any wrong. You cannot approach the court. So virtually after Ram Mandir, the interpretation which is given by Congress and the other intellectuals is that you cannot go to the court and you cannot argue any matter on merits, and you cannot bring facts and figures on the record of the court, which is precisely the most it's most horrific than the constitutional ethos which were debated upon by the founding fathers of our country. And now one more last point I want to say, that this country was divided in 1947 on communal lines. After 1947, an entire population has taken away a particular piece of land on the basis of communal lines. And today in this constitutional country, if we can't go to the court after 70 years of Ram Temple, for another, we are ready to invest another 30, 40, 50 years, and I don't know how many years. Then if that is not possible in this country, then the question is, have we really got justice? Have we really got correct freedom?
Well, viewers, these are some both existential as well as legal and philosophical questions that we need to ponder.